On my wedding night, I hid under the bed to prank my husband. I wanted to make him laugh, to surprise him, to start our life together with a silly story we would joke about for years. But the person who walked into the room wasn't him. Someone else crossed the threshold, tossed a phone onto the bed, and put it on speaker. What I heard next made the blood freeze in my veins. Hello. Thank you all for being with me today. Before I start the story, I'm very curious to know what city you're watching me from. If you want, drop it in the comments. The dust under the bed tickled my nose. I pressed my palm over my mouth to keep from sneezing. I was lying on my stomach, flattened against the floor, my insanely expensive white wedding dress crushed against the hardwood. Delicate lace caught on the stiff fibers of the rug. It looked ridiculous. I knew that. A 30-year-old woman, hiding under the bed on her own wedding night, like a child playing hide and seek. But I wanted to see Arthur's face. I had replayed the scene in my head over and over. He would walk into our bridal suite, loosen his tie, and maybe softly whisper my name in that gentle, exhausted voice I loved so much. Chloe. And then I would roll out from under the bed, tangled in tulle and silk, and we would laugh, collapsing onto the mattress. That was how our happily ever after was supposed to begin. For the last 6 hours, we had danced, cut the cake, and shaken hands with people I barely knew. And now, finally, we were supposed to be alone. At least, that's what I thought. The heavy mahogany door creaked open. I bit my lip to keep from giggling. My entire body tensed, ready to jump out at any second. But the footsteps were wrong. They weren't Arthur's hesitant, calm steps. They were a sharp, deliberate clicking. Click, clack, click. Expensive heels. I felt a sudden chill. Through the narrow gap between the bedspread and the floor, I saw silver stilettos come to a halt in the center of the room. I recognized them instantly. They belonged to Victoria Vance, my newly minted mother-in-law. Yes, Ashley. I'm in the suite. Victoria's voice was firm, authoritative. She wasn't whispering. She spoke as if she owned the place. She put the phone on speaker and tossed it onto the bed, the very bed I was hiding under. The mattress springs creaked right above my head, dipping slightly. Are they gone? A thin female voice asked through the phone. Arthur is downstairs, settling the catering bill, Victoria replied. And the girl? Who knows where she is? Probably sitting in the bathroom, touching up her cheap makeup. She started pacing the room. The click, clack, click of her heels echoed in my ears like gunshots. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it would burst out of my chest. The girl with the cheap makeup, just a few hours ago, this same woman had hugged me with tears in her eyes, welcoming me into the family, calling me a blessing. So, it's all done? Ashley asked. It's all done, Victoria answered. I heard the flick of a lighter, then a long, satisfied exhale. Smoke drifted down toward the floor. The ring is on her finger. The papers are signed. She's in a trap, and doesn't even realize it. She laughed, a dry, cruel sound. Chloe, the idiot, a small-town nobody. She thinks she hit the jackpot marrying my son. She has no idea this is all just a smokescreen. My face grew cold. My hands turned to ice. What was she talking about? Are you sure about the penthouse? The voice on the phone asked. If they divorce, won't she take half? We have it all figured out, Victoria replied, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial tone that made my stomach churn. They'll live together for a year, maybe a year and a half, just enough to make it look believable. She paused, as if savoring every word. Then Arthur will start complaining. We'll paint her as unstable. Or better yet, make her life so unbearable that she leaves on her own. We have all the bank receipts proving that he was the one who made the down payment. We'll take the penthouse through the courts. She won't have the money for a decent lawyer. I clamped both hands over my mouth. Tears burned my eyes. The penthouse. Our beautiful $10 million penthouse in Tribeca, New York City. Legally, the deed was in my name, but I had let Arthur handle all the wire transfers to stroke his ego, to let him feel like the provider. She's practically an orphan, my mother-in-law continued, kicking off one of her shoes. It landed inches from my nose. Her father is some retired blue-collar guy living off a pension down in Boca Raton, or somewhere like that, who knows. She has no safety net. When we seize the assets, she'll come crawling back to whatever trailer park she crawled out of. And Arthur will finally be able to marry a woman with real class. Someone like Jessica. The name hit me like a physical punch. Jessica, Arthur's childhood best friend. The woman in the skin-tight red dress who had smiled a little too widely throughout the entire wedding. Arthur is moving up, Victoria said, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. He just needed a stepping stone. And Chloe? Well, Chloe is a very sturdy stepping stone. I was shaking so violently, I was afraid the floor beneath me would rattle. This wasn't a joke or a misunderstanding. It was a heist. My marriage, my love, my life. It was all a carefully orchestrated scam, the sole purpose of which was to steal my real estate. Suddenly, Victoria stopped pacing. Hold on. She stepped closer to the bed. I saw her feet pivot in my direction. She leaned down. I stopped breathing. Through the narrow slit, I saw her hand reach under the bed. Long, perfectly manicured nails scratched the hardwood inches from my face. She picked something up. My pearl earring. It must have fallen off when I crawled under there. She brought it closer, inspecting it. Trash, she muttered, tossing the earring onto the nightstand. Probably plastic. She straightened up. I almost blacked out from relief, but it didn't last long. The door handle turned. Mom? Arthur's voice rang out. I'm here, sweetheart, Victoria cooed, instantly transforming back into the doting mother. My husband walked into the room. The man to whom, less than 3 hours ago, I had sworn love and fidelity. I waited, prayed, hoped with all my heart that he would say something, anything, to defend me. But instead, he let out a heavy sigh and collapsed onto the bed, right on top of me. Is she here? No, Victoria answered. Probably wandering the hallways somewhere. Listen, we need to discuss the bank transfer before she gets back. I know, Mom, I know, Arthur groaned. But let's do it tomorrow. Tonight, I still have to fake being thrilled about my wedding night, and that's going to take a lot of energy. Something broke inside me. It wasn't a crack. It was a clean, final fracture. The naive Chloe died in that dusty darkness under the bed, and something else began to wake up. Carefully, I slipped my hand into the corset of my dress and pulled out my phone. Silently, I tapped the screen and hit the voice recorder. The red timer started running. Keep talking, I thought, feeling a cold fury wash over me. Keep talking. Give me everything. And they did. To understand why a woman with an MBA and a trust fund large enough to buy the entire hotel was hiding under a bed pretending to be poor, you have to understand my mother. My mother, Eleanor Sterling, was the kindest person you could ever meet, and also incredibly wealthy, the heiress to a massive shipping empire. She married my father, Richard Sterling, when he was just starting his commercial real estate business. They were a power couple, but my mother loved with her eyes closed. When she died 10 years ago, it wasn't the cancer that killed her. It was a broken heart. She had discovered that her own sister and her best friend had been siphoning money from her charitable foundations for years. They didn't love her. They loved what she could give them. On her deathbed, she squeezed my hand and made me promise her something. Chloe, she whispered, her voice so fragile it seemed it might shatter. Find a man who loves you for who you are. Not for the last name, not for the bank accounts. Be careful, my sweet girl. Money is a magnifying glass. It shows people for who they really are, but sometimes it burns you before you can see the truth. That promise became my law. My father took the warning to the extreme. In business, he was an apex predator. The CEO of Apex Global Holdings taught me how to read contracts before I could read fairy tales. When I started dating, I trusted no one. They can smell the money, Chloe, he would say. They look at you and see a winning Powerball ticket. So, I devised a test. A filter. I moved out of our massive estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, and rented a modest, slightly run-down apartment in a working-class neighborhood in Queens. I drove a 5-year-old Honda Civic. I worked as an administrative assistant at a logistics company, a job I actually enjoyed for its quiet routine. Though, at night, in secret, I managed my own massive investment portfolio. To the world, I was just Chloe, a sweet girl with student loans and a strict grocery budget. And then I met Arthur. It was a rainy Tuesday. I ran into a coffee shop and dropped my wallet right into a puddle. Mud splashed everywhere. I was on the verge of tears. The week had been awful. A handsome man in a slightly worn jacket picked up the wallet and wiped the mud off with his sleeve. "I believe this is yours," he said with a smile. He had warm hazel eyes speckled with green. I checked the wallet. Nothing was missing. To thank him, I offered to buy him a coffee. "I'd love that," he replied, glancing at his watch. "I've got about 20 minutes before I have to get back to the site." We ended up talking for 2 hours. He told me he worked in corporate sales, that he was always barely hitting his quotas, that he drove an old car that broke down constantly. He talked about his dreams of traveling, of seeing the art in Italy, of everything he wanted but couldn't afford. "I don't care about being rich," he said, looking me dead in the eye. "I just want a life that feels real. Sunday breakfasts, a dog, someone you can just sit in silence with." It was exactly what I wanted to hear. Over the next 2 years, Arthur passed every test. He never asked me for money. He brought me wildflowers picked from the side of the road because he couldn't afford expensive roses, telling me these were more beautiful anyway. He clipped coupons with me. When my car broke down, a carefully orchestrated breakdown, he made a 40-minute detour every day for a week to pick me up. I fell in love, deeply, madly, stupidly. I introduced him to my father but kept the lie going. I told Arthur that Richard Sterling was a retired construction foreman living on a pension in Boca Raton. My dad played along, even though he grumbled about it. He visited wearing flannel shirts, complained about gas prices, and hid his Patek Philippe watch in his pocket. "He's not a bad guy," my dad admitted once after dinner, stirring a cheap beer he absolutely loathed. "But he's soft, Chloe. He listens to his mother too much, respects her too much." "That's a good thing," I defended him. How wrong I was. The very first time I met Victoria, she looked me up and down as if I were a stain on her rug. She lived in a small, cluttered suburban house, but acted like a deposed queen. She constantly talked about how Arthur deserved better, and how insanely expensive life was now. "Tell me, Chloe," she would say with a smile that chilled the room. "Do you really think you can support a family on an administrative assistant's salary? Arthur needs a woman who will pull him up." I would smile and swallow the insult, thinking, if you only knew. I believed that after the wedding, when I revealed the truth about my wealth, she would be thrilled. I planned to tell Arthur everything during our honeymoon. I wanted to see his eyes light up when he realized he would never have to stress about a mortgage payment again. I was so eager to give him the world that I failed to notice he was already planning to steal the tiny fraction of it I had shown him. The wedding planning should have been the happiest time of my life. But looking back, I see the red flags were waving so violently they practically slapped me in the face. First, there was the guest list. Victoria insisted on inviting half the town. "It's a matter of image," she snapped, when I suggested an intimate gathering. "We must show that the Vance family is thriving." Because I was supposedly poor, Victoria and Arthur assumed I couldn't pay much. She made a big show of saying she would chip in, but every time a bill came for the florist or the venue, she forgot her wallet in the car, or her card was declined. Ultimately, I paid for almost everything out of my savings. Savings that were actually drawn from an unlimited Black Centurion card hidden in a secret compartment of my purse. And then there was Jessica. "You have to meet Jess," Arthur said one evening, about 3 months before the wedding. "She's like a sister to me. We grew up together." She was striking in the most obvious way: tight clothes, a loud laugh, and an unsettling habit of touching Arthur's arm every time she spoke. When we went out for drinks, she barely looked at me. The entire evening, she reminisced with him about stories and inside jokes I didn't understand. "Oh, remember that night in the Maldives?" She laughed, leaning into him. "You said you couldn't afford to travel," I said, confused. Arthur froze for a second. "It was a post-grad trip. My parents saved up for years." Victoria adored Jessica. She compared us openly. "Jessica, that dress is stunning. You look like a movie star." And then, turning to me, "Chloe, maybe she can take you shopping. You always dress so plain." I brushed it off, telling myself I was secure. I had the ring, I had the man. But the real issue became the penthouse. We needed a place to live. Arthur's bachelor pad was tiny, and my queen's apartment wasn't meant for two. I found a breathtaking penthouse in Tribeca. It was a bank-owned foreclosure, valued at $10 million, a price completely out of reach for an admin assistant and a struggling salesman. I have an inheritance, I told him one night. It was a half-truth. My grandmother had left me a trust. It's enough to buy it outright. Arthur's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Outright? Are you serious? Yes. I want us to start our marriage without debt. That same night, Victoria showed up. Suddenly, she was very interested in me. She studied me with a calculating gaze. That is wonderful news, Chloe, she purred, but buying real estate is complicated. Taxes, insurance, liabilities, you've never handled property. Arthur works with corporate contracts every day. Why don't you let him handle it? Of course, I can take care of it, Arthur said, taking my hand, and think about how it looks. I want to feel like I'm contributing. If you wire the funds to my account, I'll sign the cashier's checks and handle the closing. Let the co-op board think I'm the man of the house. Please, for my pride. It sounded absurd, but he looked so sincere. And Victoria nodded approvingly. It's about respect, Chloe. A wife shouldn't emasculate her husband before the marriage even begins. So, I did it. I wired the money. But I wasn't naive. My father raised me better than that. I had my own lawyer, my best friend Penelope Penny Clark, draft the paperwork. The money passed through Arthur's account to secure the deal, but the deed was registered 100% in my name alone. Arthur never read the fine print. He only saw the millions hit his account and leave it. He assumed that because he signed the checks, the penthouse was his. He thought he had played me. I remember the day we got the keys. Arthur spun me around in the middle of the empty living room. Our castle, he said proudly. I pressed my lips to his shoulder and whispered to myself, my castle. But he didn't hear that. Now, lying under the bed, listening to Victoria talk about how they were going to legally take the penthouse, it all clicked into place. They didn't know the truth. They believed it was marital property bought with his funds because the wire trace came from his bank. They genuinely believed they could prove I had contributed nothing. Victoria's voice snapped me back to reality. When does Jessica's lease run out? I flinched. Jessica was on speakerphone? No, wait. Victoria wasn't talking to Ashley anymore. She was talking to Arthur, asking him about Jessica. In 6 months, Arthur mumbled, his face muffled by the pillows. That's why we need to expedite this. Mom, I can't have her sleeping on her sister's couch forever. Plus, the baby is going to need a nursery. The world stopped spinning. The silence under the bed was deafening. The baby. I clamped my hand over my mouth so hard I tasted blood. The word hung in the air like toxic gas. Don't worry about the baby. Victoria brushed it off with a businesslike tone. We'll set up the nursery in the second guest room as soon as Chloe is out of here, and we'll paint over that hideous yellow color she picked. My stomach violently cramped. I was seconds away from throwing up right on the carpet. Jessica was pregnant. Arthur, my husband of less than a day, had knocked up his best friend who was like a sister. I just feel bad for her, Mom, he said. For a split second, a tiny spark of hope flared in my chest. Maybe he has a conscience. Maybe he feels guilty. Bad? About what? Victoria snapped. About securing your future? No, it's just. Chloe is nice, he said hesitantly. She cooks for me, she washes my car, she looks at me like I'm a hero. Crushing her like this is going to be brutal. Oh, spare me the tears, Victoria mocked. She's a nobody, Arthur, you said it yourself. She's boring. She spends her weekends reading books, instead of networking. She buys everything on sale. Do you really want to spend the rest of your life with a woman who hunts for clearance tags? Or do you want to be with Jessica, who knows how to shine in high society? Jess is a firecracker, he muttered, his voice changing, growing thick with lust. And Chloe is as bland as vanilla. That cut deeper than the financial betrayal. Vanilla. I had muted my entire existence for him. I hid my designer clothes, my love for vintage wines, my connections to politicians and CEOs, all so he wouldn't feel insecure. I became vanilla because I believed he wanted a simple, wholesome love. Exactly, Victoria said. By the way, did you get the bank alert? The rest of the wedding cash gifts cleared. 50 grand is sitting in your joint account. Good. Tomorrow, transfer half of it to my account as wedding expenses, and then we'll slowly drain the rest. When you file for divorce, she won't have a dime to fight with. Got it, Arthur grunted. And the penthouse deed is secure? I have the wire receipt from my account to the seller, he said. It proves I paid the $10 million. She won't be able to prove the origin of the funds if we claim it was a private family loan I was paying back. They sounded so confident. Ridiculously confident. And absurdly stupid. They had no concept of forensic accounting. And they certainly didn't know that the pensioner from Boca Raton commanded a legal team that ate people like them for breakfast. All right, get up, Victoria ordered. Wash your face. You look guilty. When she gets back, you have to play the part. Smile. Talk about the future. Make her feel secure. I really don't want to sleep with her tonight. You have to consummate the marriage, Victoria cut him off sharply. It complicates an annulment if she tries to go that route. We need a divorce, so we can divide the assets. Fine, Arthur groaned. He rolled off the bed. The mattress lifted, finally relieving the pressure on my back. I'll check the hallway. She's probably crying on a staircase somewhere. I'm leaving, Victoria announced. I snagged her spare apartment key from her purse earlier. I'll let myself out. A chill ran over my skin. She had dug through my purse. She stole my key. The violation made my insides twist. I watched her silver heels head toward the door, followed by Arthur's dress shoes. Night, Mom. Thanks for everything. Anything for my boy. Just stick to the plan. 1 year, and you're free. The door clicked shut. Silence fell over the room again. But it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, charged with the energy of my collapsing life. I waited 5 minutes, then another 5. I had to be sure. Slowly, my body numb, I crawled out from under the bed. Everything ached. My dress, once so white, so perfect, was now streaked with gray dust. I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror. Tangled hair, smudged makeup, but my eyes were clear. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. A cold, mechanical calm had washed over me. The exact same calm my father possessed right before initiating a hostile corporate takeover. I walked to the closet, stripped off the wedding dress, the symbol of my own idiocy, and kicked it into a corner. I pulled on jeans and a hoodie I had packed for the morning after brunch, and grabbed my bag. Victoria really had taken my apartment key, but my car keys were still there, along with my black Centurion card. I opened the door to the hallway. It was empty. Arthur must have gone down to the lobby bar to liquid courage himself into sleeping with me. I didn't take the elevator. In my sneakers, I sprinted down 12 flights of stairs. I burst out into the cool night air, found my beat-up Civic with the hidden Porsche engine, my one little indulgence, and tore out of the underground parking garage. I dialed a number via Bluetooth. "Dad," I said when he answered on the second ring. "Chloe, it's 2 a.m. Is everything all right?" "No," I replied, my voice dead level. "You were right about everything. Wake up, Penny. I'm coming home. We're going to war." Usually, the drive from the city to Greenwich took 45 minutes. I made it in 25. I pulled up to the massive wrought iron gates. The camera scanned my plates, and the gates swung open silently. As I drove up the winding tree-lined driveway, I felt the skin of Chloe, the admin assistant, shedding off me. I was returning to my kingdom. My father was waiting on the porch in a silk robe, an unlit cigar between his fingers. Next to him stood Penny, my best friend, and the most ruthless corporate litigator in Manhattan. She was in her pajamas, but her laptop was already open on the patio table. I slammed the car door and marched up the steps. My father looked at me. He saw the dust on my hoodie, the hard set of my jaw, and he didn't say, "I told you so." He just opened his arms. I pressed into him and, for exactly 10 seconds, allowed myself to be a child again. I sobbed, a single, violent release of grief, and then I pulled back. "They planned the whole thing," I said clearly. "Arthur, his mother, and Jessica want the penthouse. They want to drain the accounts. Jessica is pregnant. Penny gasped. Pregnant? On your wedding day? Yes. And I recorded everything. I placed my phone on the glass table and hit play. In the quiet of the Greenwich night, Victoria's voice sounded even more sinister. The word vanilla. The plot to make my life hell. The scheming over the wedding money. When the recording ended, my father's face was a stone mask of pure rage. He snapped the unlit cigar in half. I will destroy him, he growled. I'll buy the firm he works for and fire him. His mother will be on the street by noon. I shook my head. No, that's too fast. Too easy. I looked at Penny. If we hit them now, they'll play the victims. They'll say I'm hysterical, jealous, crazy. They'll try to drag out a fight for the penthouse, using verbal agreements and legal loopholes. No, I want to crush them properly. I want them to believe they've won. And then I'll pull the rug out so violently they'll never get back up. Penny cracked her knuckles, a dangerous smile spreading across her lips. I love the way you think. What's the play? First, the penthouse, I said. They think they have a claim because the funds hit his account. We need to shut that down. That's easy, Penny said, typing furiously. Since the deed is solely in your name, we draft a postnuptial addendum. We frame it as an insurance requirement. We tell Arthur that, because of the property's value, the underwriter requires one clear, sole owner to lower the liability premium. We include a clause where he explicitly waives any and all marital claims to the property in exchange for the lower rate. He's greedy, I added. If you tell him it'll save us $3,000 a month, he'll sign it without reading. Done, Penny nodded. I'll have the documents couriered to you by morning. Just tell him it's standard procedure. Second, my father interjected, the finances. You need to separate the assets. I need to drain the joint account before he does, I said. But that will look suspicious. Leave it, Penny advised. Let him take the $50,000 wedding money. It's bait. But we need to run a forensic audit on his employment history. If he's stealing from you, he's almost certainly embezzling from his job. My father picked up his phone. I'll have my private investigators do a deep dive into his corporate sales accounts. If he's skimming from us, he's skimming from them. And the baby? I asked quietly. We need proof. A DNA test, Penny suggested. No, that takes too long. I need to get close to Jessica. I need her to admit it herself. My father frowned. Are you going back there? Chloe, you don't have to, he said gently. You can stay here. We'll serve them papers tomorrow. I didn't move an inch. He called me bland. He thinks I'm stupid. He thinks I'm weak, I said, a dangerous steel entering my voice. I am going back. I am going to play the clumsy, naive little wife he thinks I am. I am going to make his life hell for the next month, gather enough evidence, and send him not just to divorce court, but to federal prison. I watched the dawn begin to paint the sky purple. He wanted a small-town nobody, I said. He's about to find out he married a bear trap. I slipped back into the hotel suite, just as the sun rose. I crept in, put my pajamas back on, messed up my hair, and slid into bed next to him. He smelled of stale champagne and lies. He stirred, cracking one eye open. Where were you? I couldn't sleep, I whispered, flashing a wide, empty smile. I was just so excited about our future, honey. I went down to the lobby to journal about our life together. He grunted and rolled over. Great, babe. Go to sleep. I stared at the back of his head. Sleep well. It's the last peaceful rest you'll ever have. The next morning, the greatest performance of my life began. I woke up before him and ordered room service. The most expensive items on the menu: lobster eggs Benedict, truffle hash, Dom Perignon. When the bill came, I signed for room 402 with an exaggerated flourish. He woke up, rubbing his eyes. What is all this? A celebration breakfast. I sang out. I figured, since we have all that wedding cash, we can splurge a little. He stiffened. Hey, we need to be careful with that money. My mom, we agreed to save it for emergencies. Oh, don't be a bore, I said, popping a strawberry into my mouth. Besides, I already booked us a couple's massage at the spa. $4,000, non-refundable. His jaw clenched tight. I could practically see him subtracting the amount from the pile he planned to steal for his mother. You should have asked me first. But I'm your wife. I batted my eyelashes innocently. Oh, by the way, your phone fell into the ice bucket. I already put it in a bag of rice. What? He leaped out of bed. Of course, it hadn't fallen anywhere. But while he was sleeping, I had disabled his fingerprint lock so I could access it later. 2 days later, we moved into the Tribeca penthouse, and that was when I cranked the dial to maximum. Victoria came over to inspect the apartment. She walked in like she owned the place, running her finger along the countertops. It's dusty, she criticized. You need to be more diligent. Oh, I'm so glad you're here, I exclaimed. I was just doing laundry, but these high-end machines are so confusing. I led her to the utility room. Inside the washing machine, spinning in hot water and industrial bleach, was her most prized possession, a $15,000 faux vintage fur coat she had left at Arthur's old apartment, which I had helpfully brought over to clean. That's my coat, she shrieked. Yes, I wanted to surprise you, I beamed, so it would be perfectly clean. She yanked the door open. Water flooded the floor. She pulled out a gray, matted lump that looked like a drowned rat. She screamed, "This is dry clean only. It cost $15,000. No. I burst into tears. Fake, dramatic tears streamed down my face. I was just trying to help. The tag was so small. Arthur ran in. What happened? She ruined my coat. Victoria wailed. Look, I'm so sorry. I sobbed, burying my face in Arthur's chest. I'm just a simple girl. I don't know anything about luxury coats. He looked at his mother, then at me. He was furious, but he remembered the plan. He had to keep me happy. It's fine, Mom, he said through gritted teeth. It was an accident. Chloe didn't know. Victoria stormed out of the apartment, clutching the soaking wet fur to her chest. That evening, while Arthur was seething on the couch, I pulled out the documents Penny had prepared. Honey, I said, sniffing loudly, I feel so terrible about the coat. I want to make sure I don't mess anything else up. A letter came from the insurance company today. They said, because the penthouse is so valuable, the liability on the policy is astronomical. I paused for effect. But if you sign this waiver stating you aren't a primary owner, the premium drops by $3,000 a month. Since I cost you so much today, I thought saving some money here would help. Arthur's eyes lit up at the mention of $3,000. Let me see that. He scanned the document quickly. The text was dense, packed with legal jargon. He saw the bold header, I Insurance Liability Waiver. The paragraph where he explicitly waived all marital rights and claims to the property he completely skimmed over. All right, he said, grabbing a pen. At least you're trying to fix your mistake. He signed it. I watched the ink dry. Click. The trap snapped shut. For the next 2 weeks, I became a hurricane of incompetence. I cooked dinner every night but accidentally used salt instead of sugar in his coffee. I shrank his favorite cashmere sweaters in the dryer. I forgot to pay the internet bill, leaving him without Wi-Fi for his video games for 3 days. I pushed him to his absolute limit, and the more desperate he got, the more frequently he ran to Jessica. I tracked him. My father's private investigator had planted a GPS tracker on his car. Every time he said he was working late, he was parked at Jessica's apartment. One night, he came home reeking of her perfume, a cheap vanilla scent. Work was hell, he sighed, collapsing onto the sofa. You work too hard, I said, rubbing his shoulders. You need to relax. Why don't we host a dinner party? What? A dinner for your family. Your mom is still mad about the coat. I want to make amends. Let's invite everyone. Victoria, your cousins, and Jessica too. She's your best friend, right? Arthur hesitated. I don't know, Chloe. You're not exactly a master chef. I'll practice, I promised. Please, I want to show them I can be the perfect wife. He smirked. I knew exactly what he was thinking. Let her humiliate herself. My mom will rip her to shreds. It'll make the divorce easier to justify if everyone sees how useless she is. Fine, Arthur agreed. Next Saturday, just don't ruin it. I won't, I smiled. It'll be a night no one will ever forget. The guest list ballooned quickly. Victoria, anticipating another failure on my part, invited her sister, 2 nosy nieces, and of course, Jessica. I was about to fill my home with people who despised me. Penny came over while Arthur was at work to help me prepare. Actually, we were planting hidden microcameras in the living room and dining room. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, checking the feed on her iPad. "It's going to get bloody." "I need witnesses," I said, chopping onions with almost violent precision. "I need them to say the worst parts out loud on camera. And I need to confirm the pregnancy." The day of the dinner, I woke up early. I went to a discount supermarket and bought the cheapest, lowest quality ingredients I could find: fatty ground beef, wilted vegetables, and boxed wine that cost less than $10. Then I went into the bathroom while Arthur was in the shower. I dug through his gym bag, the one he supposedly took to the office, but actually took to Jessica's. In a side pocket, I found a pharmacy receipt, prenatal vitamins, dated yesterday. Gotcha. I slipped the receipt into my pocket. Guests started arriving at 6 p.m. Victoria walked in first, wearing a brand new dress I suspected she bought using the wedding cash Arthur had transferred to her. "Well," she sniffed, looking around, "at least you swept the floors this time." "Welcome, Victoria," I sang out, pouring her a glass of the cheap boxed wine. She took a sip and grimaced. "What is this vinegar?" "An artisanal blend," I lied cheerfully. Then Jessica arrived. She walked in holding Arthur's arm, pressing into him just a little too intimately. She wore a loose, flowing dress to hide her midsection, but I noticed how her hand instinctively rested on her stomach. "Hi, Chloe," she said in a sickeningly sweet voice. "It's so cozy in here." "Hi, Jess." "I'm so glad you could make it," I replied, staring directly at her stomach. "You look glowing." She flinched and dropped her hand. Arthur stepped between us. "Let's get drinks." "I'm starving." I retreated to the kitchen. The menu for the evening: overcooked, rubbery roast beef, lumpy mashed potatoes, and a salad consisting mostly of iceberg lettuce cores. While cooking, I listened to the audio feed from the living room camera. "God, this wine is swill," Victoria complained. "I can't believe he married her, not even for the property." "Keep your voice down, Mom," Arthur whispered. "Just a few more months. Then we evict her, sell the penthouse, and buy a massive house in the Hamptons." "I hate hiding," Jessica whined. "My back hurts. I want to post pictures of us." "Soon, babe," Arthur chuckled. "As soon as we send the small town nobody packing." I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. I took a deep breath and pulled out a special seasoning I had prepared. It wasn't poison, I'm not a criminal. It was an ungodly amount of salt and white vinegar mixed into the gravy. "Dinner is served," I announced brightly. We sat at the table. Victoria's nieces immediately started whispering and laughing at my mismatched napkins. "Well, Chloe," Victoria started, sawing at the rubbery meat with her knife, "Arthur tells me you're considering culinary classes. Clearly, you haven't started yet." The table erupted in laughter. Arthur laughed too, squeezing Jessica's hand under the table. "Actually," I said, my voice trembling slightly as I kept up the act, "I tried really hard." "Trying isn't succeeding, honey," Jessica smirked. "Some women are just born to be good wives, and some aren't." "Oh?" I asked, looking her dead in the eye. "And what makes a good wife, Jessica? Sleeping with another woman's husband?" Dead silence fell over the table. I didn't mean that," Jessica stammered. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I laughed nervously. "I meant being supportive. Please, pass the potatoes." Arthur shot me a murderous glare. "Chloe, stop acting weird." "I'm not being weird," I said, standing up to pour more wine. I stepped closer to Jessica. "I just admire your friendship so much. You guys are so close." I hooked my foot under the edge of the rug. I tripped. The pitcher of red wine flew out of my hands and crashed directly into Jessica's lap. "Ah!" she screamed, leaping up. The dark red liquid soaked the thin fabric of her dress, causing it to cling tightly to her body, perfectly outlining the unmistakable, hard curve of a pregnant belly. "Oh my God," I gasped. "I'm such a clumsy idiot." "Look what you did! This is silk!" Jessica shrieked, letting her mask drop completely. Calm down, Arthur yelled, rushing to her side and dabbing her stomach with a napkin. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? Absolute silence. Arthur froze. He realized exactly what he had just said out loud. He slowly turned to look at me. Victoria stared at me. Jessica stared at me. I wasn't crying. I wasn't apologizing. I stood at the head of the table, and for the first time in months, I wasn't smiling. The baby? I repeated quietly. The words hung in the air like a live grenade. I meant, Arthur stammered. He meant, is she okay? Victoria interrupted sharply, jumping to her feet. You know how fragile Jessica is. And you, she pointed a trembling finger at me. You are useless. You can't cook, you can't clean, and now you're assaulting our guests. I told my son he was making a mistake marrying trash like you. Normally, this is where I would shrink away, apologize, and run for towels. But instead, I calmly wiped a drop of spilled wine off my wrist. Sit down, Victoria. What? Excuse me, she blinked, stunned. I said, sit down. I looked at Arthur. And you? Step away from her stomach. We all know exactly what's in there. You're drunk. Arthur tried to take control, puffing out his chest. Go to the bedroom. We'll talk later. No, we're talking right now. I walked over to the credenza and picked up the karaoke microphone, his favorite toy. What are you doing? Jessica hissed. You're crazy. Crazy, maybe, I smiled coldly. Crazy rich. They didn't understand. You see, I began, circling the table like a shark. For the past 2 months, I've been listening to all of you. I heard Victoria call me a nobody. I heard Arthur call me vanilla. I heard Jessica laugh about redecorating my nursery. You were listening, Arthur whispered. Oh, honey, I was doing a lot more than listening. I pulled the pharmacy receipt out of my pocket and dropped it on his plate. Pharmacy. Dated 2 days ago. Purchaser, Arthur Vance. Prenatal vitamins. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Then I pulled out the insurance document. Remember this? The insurance waiver? That's just liability paperwork, he mumbled. No, I said clearly. It's a post-nuptial agreement. Right here, you legally waived any and all claims to this property. You acknowledged that 100% of the funds belong to me, and you surrendered all rights to the asset in the event of a divorce. You gave up the penthouse yourself, Arthur, I summarized. You traded your golden ticket for $3,000 a month. Victoria's face turned purple. You tricked him. That will never hold up in court. Oh, it absolutely will, Penny said, stepping into the dining room from the hallway. You know that cheap lawyer friend you guys mentioned? Penny added calmly, adjusting her glasses. I'm actually a senior partner at one of the top corporate litigation firms in Manhattan. This document is bulletproof. So what? Jessica screamed. Arthur is going to leave you anyway. He loves me. We're going to be a family, and you'll be alone with your cats. Really? I let out a short, sharp laugh. Then, Arthur, why don't you tell everyone where you got the money for Jessica's new car and Victoria's new dress and all that wedding cash you supposedly saved up? Arthur was sweating profusely, looking like he'd just sprinted a marathon. I saved it from my commissions. No, I said. You stole it. From Apex Global Holdings, you created fake vendor LLCs. You submitted invoices for materials that never existed. You thought you wouldn't get caught because the company is massive and no one would notice a few 100,000 missing. So what? Victoria screeched. Apex Global doesn't know that. I walked over to the front door and rested my hand on the handle. That's the funniest part of all this, I said, looking at each of them. You guys never actually bothered to find out who I was, did you? You just assumed Chloe was just Chloe. What are you talking about? Arthur whispered. I'm not just Chloe Sterling, I said, dropping the bomb. My father is Richard Sterling, the CEO and majority owner of Apex Global Holdings. The silence crashed down like a concrete slab. Victoria gripped the edge of the table to keep her legs from giving out. No, that's a lie. Your dad is a retired foreman in Florida. He is currently in Florida. Yes, I nodded. On his yacht. Arthur looked like he was going to vomit. He had been stealing from his own wife's father. He had called the heiress of the company he worked for Vanilla. You're the heiress, his voice cracked. Yes, I replied. And the only reason I didn't fire you the minute I found out was because I wanted to see exactly how deep the rot went. I looked at him with icy calm, and it goes very, very deep. Chloe, baby. Arthur took a step toward me, holding his hands up. Wait, let me explain. I was confused. My mom forced me into this. Don't you dare put this on me, Victoria shrieked, already scanning the room for an exit. Explanations are no longer accepted, I said. I have the forensic accounting of your embezzlement. I have the recordings of your conspiracy to commit fraud. I have the proof of infidelity. I tapped the microphone so everyone could hear, and so there would be no doubts left. I want you all to hear exactly what I heard on my wedding night. Just so you understand why I was hiding under that bed, I pulled out my phone and connected it to the Bluetooth speaker. A crackle filled the room, and then Victoria's voice exploded from the surround sound. Sharp, venomous. The insults, the penthouse plot, the mocking, the conspiracy. Victoria clamped her hands over her ears. Jessica burst into tears. Arthur collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands, but the recording didn't stop. The past version of me, the one shivering under the bed, didn't say a word. She only listened. And yet, Victoria's recorded voice filled the dining room with scorching clarity. Arthur shrank right in front of everyone, sinking lower and lower. His face turned ashen, as if all the blood had been drained from him. Jessica was sobbing hysterically now, mascara running down her cheeks in thick black tracks. Even cornered, Victoria tried to bite back. Turn it off. She lunged toward the phone. That's illegal. You can't record people without their consent. It's inadmissible in New York. I snatched the phone away before she could reach it. Actually, Victoria, I said calmly amidst the chaos, New York is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's completely legal, and I knew. So yes, entirely admissible. At that exact moment, the front door, which I had unlocked, remotely swung open. Heavy boots hit the hardwood floor. Blue flashing lights pulsed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the walls of the penthouse they thought was theirs. Penny stepped back in. Behind her were two uniformed NYPD officers, and my father's head of corporate security, Detective Miller. Arthur Vance, Detective Miller announced in a booming voice. You are under arrest. Arthur jumped up, knocking his chair over. Arrested? For what? I didn't do anything. This is a domestic dispute. Not for cheating, Mr. Vance, Penny said, stepping closer with a freezing smile. Though that certainly expedites the divorce papers I've already filed. You are under arrest for grand larceny, embezzlement, and wire fraud against Apex Global Holdings. What? Arthur screamed. I leaned against the table. We audited your accounts. You weren't saving commissions. You created 3 shell companies under the name GLV Consulting. Over the last 6 months, you wired out over $400,000. Victoria turned ghost white. I didn't know where the money came from. He said it was a bonus. Detective Miller pulled out handcuffs. Victoria Vance, we have text messages where you instruct him on how to structure the deposits to avoid IRS flagging. That makes you an accessory. No! Victoria screamed as an officer approached her. I am a respectable woman. You have no right to touch me. The officer spun her around, showing zero respect for her so-called status. The metallic click of the handcuffs was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Arthur! Jessica sobbed, clutching her stomach. Do something. You promised you'd take care of us. Arthur looked at Jessica, then at his mother, then at me. The cops were already twisting his arms behind his back. Chloe, he whimpered. Please, talk to your dad. Tell him to drop the charges. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll leave town. Just don't send me to jail. I'm scared. You know I have asthma. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had once loved looked pathetic. A weak man who tried to play strong and broke immediately. I'm sorry, Arthur, I said quietly, but Vanilla doesn't have the authority to stop a federal investigation. You earned this all on your own." As they marched him toward the door, he shot me one last look. There was no arrogance left. Only terror. Victoria kept screaming that she knew the mayor. It was a lie. Penny handed me a folder, the divorce filing, and a 4-hour eviction notice for unauthorized occupants. I walked over to Jessica. She was the only one without handcuffs. She was trembling in her wine-soaked dress. "You have 5 minutes," I said. "Grab your purse and take your fake sob stories with you. If you're still here when the cops get down to the lobby, I'll have them come back up for trespassing." "But he promised me," she whispered, staring at the empty doorway where Arthur had been dragged out. "He promised me, too," I replied. "He's a liar, Jessica. You were just next in line. Run while you can." She scrambled to her feet and ran out without looking back. The living room descended into silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind the wreckage of a fake life. Overturned chairs, stained wine glasses, and the echo of justice. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I looked at Penny. She gave me a slow, respectful nod. That was the moment, the exact second I took my life back. The days following the arrest blurred into an endless stream of paperwork, signatures, phone calls, and ruthless decisions. While Arthur spent the night in a holding cell without bail, his assets frozen, I focused on scrubbing him from my life like a stain I never wanted to see again. First came the physical purge. I no longer wanted the penthouse. To me, it was contaminated. I hired a crew to pack up everything that belonged to me and move it out, ensuring I didn't have to touch a single item. Arthur's belongings, his clothes, his gaming console, his collection of limited edition sneakers bought with stolen money, I didn't burn. That would have been dramatic, but illegal. Instead, I had it all boxed up and shipped to the only address left: Victoria's suburban house. But Victoria wasn't there to receive it. It turned out her financial situation was infinitely more fragile than anyone knew. She had been taking out second and third mortgages on her house just to maintain the illusion of wealth. When the legal fees hit her and Arthur's stolen money dried up overnight, the house of cards imploded. A week after the arrest, Penny called me. "You're going to love this," she said with deep satisfaction. "The bank foreclosed on Victoria's house yesterday. She's out on bail, but she has nowhere to live. She tried to check into a motel, but her cards are frozen." I was standing by the window in my father's Greenwich estate when I heard this. "Where is she now?" "At her sister's house," Penny replied. "The same sister who laughed at your napkins. Victoria is sleeping on a pull-out couch in an unfinished basement." A dark satisfaction tightened my chest. The woman who mocked a pensioner was now learning what it meant to survive day to day. Then came the divorce hearing. Fast, brutal, with no room for theatrics. Arthur was patched in via video link from the county jail. He looked destroyed, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made him look even more pathetic. When the judge asked if he contested the divorce or the validity of the postnuptial agreement, he just shook his head. "No, Your Honor," he mumbled. The judge didn't mince words. "You signed a waiver relinquishing all rights to the Tribeca property. You have admitted to infidelity. The plaintiff has provided overwhelming evidence of fraud. Do you have anything to add?" Arthur looked into the camera. For a second, our eyes met across the cold screen. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "You committed multiple felonies," the judge corrected him. "Divorce granted. All assets remain with the plaintiff. You are ordered to pay all legal fees." Of course, he couldn't pay them. I covered them myself, the final tax for trusting the wrong man. Jessica didn't walk away clean either. Without Arthur's financial support, and with the scandal making rounds in our social circles, she lost her job at a high-end boutique. Word travels fast in Manhattan. She tried to contact me once, sending a long email full of excuses, shifting all the blame onto Arthur and painting herself as the victim. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the email to Arthur's defense attorney. Let them tear each other apart. And then came the final blow. My father spoke at Arthur's sentencing hearing as the victim of the corporate theft. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He stood tall, radiating the presence of a man used to the world parting for him. "Trust is the currency of business," my father told the judge. Mr. Vance didn't just steal money, he stole trust. He entered my family through deceit, targeted my daughter, and used my company as his personal piggy bank. He is not a victim of circumstance. He is a predator who got caught. The gavel came down like a steel door. Arthur was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Victoria received 2 years of probation and community service, primarily because she turned state's evidence and testified against her own son to save herself. It was her final betrayal. I watched her from the gallery. I watched Arthur's face as his own mother sold him out. The destruction was so complete that, for a fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. When it was all over, I walked out of the courthouse. The sun was blindingly bright. The air felt crisp. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that didn't reek of lies and cheap cologne. I was divorced. I was alone. I was 30 years old. I got into my car, my actual car this time, the Porsche 911 convertible I had kept hidden. I dropped the top and drove away, leaving the courthouse and the Vance family in the rearview mirror. I felt lighter than I had in years. The dusty, trembling woman under the bed no longer existed. In her place stood someone forged in fire. But fire leaves scars, and healing them takes far longer than exacting revenge. 3 years passed. Revenge is like a sugar rush, sharp and sweet, followed by a crushing crash. When the adrenaline of destroying them faded, I was left with something quieter and heavier, crippling trust issues. I threw myself into work and stopped hiding. I officially joined Apex Global Holdings, not as an assistant, but as the chief operating officer. I started using my full name like a suit of armor. I worked 16-hour days, expanding the empire until it grew even larger. In the boardroom, they started calling me the Ice Queen, efficient, brilliant, and completely untouchable. Dating? Out of the question. Men were liabilities. Every smile felt like a calculation. Does he see me or the bank account? A woman or a stepping stone? My only refuge was music. As a child, I played the piano, but I had quit. When I met Arthur, he told me classical music was boring. Now, I did the exact opposite. I bought a grand Steinway for my new home, a modern glass sanctuary overlooking the Hudson River, far away from the tainted Tribeca penthouse. Every night, I played, pouring all my anger, pain, and loneliness into the keys. Chopin, Rachmaninoff, anything that allowed me to breathe. One evening, my father finally convinced me to attend a charity gala supporting the arts. I didn't want to go. I hated those events. Plastic smiles, overpriced champagne, people networking under the guise of philanthropy. Just for an hour, Chloe, my dad said, adjusting his tuxedo. It's for the symphony orchestra. You love the orchestra. So I went. I stood in a corner holding a sparkling water, checking emails on my phone, counting down the minutes until I could leave without looking rude. You look like you'd rather be getting a root canal. A voice spoke right next to me. I instantly tensed. The mask slid into place. I turned slowly. He was tall, broad-shouldered. He wore his tuxedo effortlessly, like he was used to it, but it clearly wasn't brand new. His dark hair was slightly messy, and his amber eyes were warm. Actually, I replied coldly, I'd prefer a tax audit. Root canals take too long. He laughed genuinely, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Mason Wright, he said, holding out a hand. I'm the architect who designed the museum's new wing. And right now, I'm hiding from a donor who wants to discuss the feng shui of the restrooms. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and rough, calloused. The hands of a man who actually built things, not just signed checks. Chloe, I said simply. Chloe, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. Since we're both hiding, want to see something incredible. The acoustics in the main hall. When it's empty, it's unreal. Against my better judgment, I followed him. We slipped into the concert hall during the intermission. The stage was empty, except for a single grand piano, sitting alone, as if waiting for someone. Please, Mason said, gesturing to the instrument. I saw your fingers tapping against your glass when the quartet was playing earlier. You play, don't you? I froze. I haven't played publicly in years. There's no public here, he smiled gently. Just you and the ghost of Mozart. I sat down. I rested my hands on the keys and let out everything that was locked inside. A nocturne, full of longing, pain, and an ache that existed long before I ever met Arthur. The music filled the massive, empty hall. It bounced off the wood, climbed the walls, and echoed back down. I closed my eyes and forgot everything. The betrayal, the shame, the fear. There was only the piano and me. When I finished, the silence hung thick and beautiful. I opened my eyes. Mason was staring at me. Not at my jewelry, not at my designer dress. At me. At my face. Like someone was finally seeing what was inside. That, he started, his voice thick with emotion. That was the saddest and most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Who hurt you so badly, Chloe? The question hit me without warning. I stood up abruptly, as if the bench had caught fire. That's none of your business, I snapped, my walls slamming back up. I have to go. Wait. He caught up with me at the edge of the stage. Let me take you to dinner. A real dinner, not these miniature crab cakes. No, I said, walking faster. I'm not asking you on a date, he said, almost jogging to keep pace. I'm asking to get to know the person who can make a piano cry like that. I stopped. I looked him dead in the face. He seemed sincere, but Arthur had seemed sincere too. Arthur had picked up my muddy wallet. Arthur had done the right things hundreds of times, until he didn't. I can't, I whispered. I really can't. I left the gala like Cinderella, only instead of a glass slipper, I left behind the first tiny crack in my armor. Mason didn't give up. He didn't send expensive flowers. He didn't send jewelry. The next day, a package arrived at my office. It was a rare, vintage collection of sheet music by female composers from the 19th century. The note attached read, "For music without conditions." I traced my finger over the words. Without conditions. And for the first time in a very long time, I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could unbuckle my armor just a little. It took him 6 months to convince me to go on a real date. 6 months of coffee, talking about architecture, engineering, real things. 6 months during which he proved over and over again that he wasn't chasing my last name. For the first 3 months, he didn't even know who my father was. He thought I was just a high-level executive. When he finally found out I was Chloe Sterling, heiress to Apex Global, he wasn't thrilled. He was annoyed. Great, he groaned, resting his forehead on the table at a diner. Now I have to worry that everyone thinks I'm a gold digger. Do you have any idea how hard it is to buy a birthday present for a woman who could buy a small island nation? I don't need I said, watching him carefully. You're getting a handmade birdhouse, he grumbled. Because it's the only thing I can build with my own hands that you can't just buy. And he actually made it. He carved a birdhouse for me. It was slightly crooked, the paint wasn't perfectly even, and yet, I put it on my fireplace mantel, right next to art so valuable it made the birdhouse look absurd. But that little wooden box became the most precious thing in the room. The real test came when he invited me to meet his family. I was terrified. I expected another Victoria Vance. I expected judgment cloaked in smiles, or flattery with a hungry undertone. But Mason's family lived in a loud, chaotic, working-class house in New Jersey. His mother was a retired public school teacher. His father was an auto mechanic. They talked over each other, laughed loudly, and hugged as if love was the most common thing in the world. So, you're Chloe, the piano player. His mother, Maria, exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent. Mason, you finally picked someone smarter than you. About time, someone yelled from the kitchen. We were getting worried. No one asked about my money. No one asked about my father's company. They asked if I liked spicy food. Yes. If I watched football. No, but I could learn. And if I wanted to see naked baby pictures of Mason in the bathtub, absolutely, yes. It was normal. It was the life Arthur had promised, but never delivered. And yet, Arthur's ghost wouldn't let me go. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept waiting for Mason to ask for a loan, or for his mother to pitch a business idea. It never happened. The turning point came a year into our relationship. My father had a mild heart attack. I was devastated. I paced the hospital corridor like a trapped animal, terrified of losing the only pillar I had left in my life. I tried to push Mason away. "Go home," I told him. "You don't have to stay here. It's going to be a long night." "Quiet, Chloe," he said softly. He sat me down in a chair, draped his jacket over my shoulders, went to the vending machine, and brought back terrible coffee. And he sat next to me, holding my hand, for 12 hours straight. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't complain. He didn't make it about himself. He was just there. When my father finally woke up, disoriented and grumpy, Mason was the first to make a joke. "Mr. Sterling, having a heart attack is a pretty extreme way to get out of playing golf with me next week." My dad laughed. Weakly, but he laughed. He looked at Mason, then at me. He saw the way Mason looked at me exhausted, but with a devotion that asked for absolutely nothing in return. Later, when I walked Mason out to his car, I broke down. "Why are you so good to me?" I sobbed. "I'm difficult. I'm paranoid. I'm broken." Mason stopped, grabbed my shoulders, and looked me dead in the eyes. "You aren't broken, Chloe. You're a survivor. You're the strongest woman I know, and I love you. Not the heiress, not the CEO." He paused. "I love the woman who hides under a bed to prank her husband because she has a playful heart. I love the woman who plays sad songs on the piano. I love you." I froze. I had never told him about the bed. "How did you know about that?" I whispered. He smiled sheepishly. "You talk in your sleep. Something about dust under the bed and mothers-in-law." I laughed through my tears. A real, deep laugh. 2 years after that night, Mason proposed. No flash mob, no ridiculous diamond. It was a random Tuesday. We were cooking dinner together. He was holding a wooden spoon. "Marry me," he said. And then, as if feeling the need to make it absolutely clear, "I already had Penny draft a prenup. It says I leave with what I came with. My tools and my good looks. I only want you." I searched his face for a catch, a hidden calculation, the fine print. There was nothing. Just love. "Yes," I said, "but I'm keeping the birdhouse." Life has a way of bringing things full circle, right when you think you've left them behind forever. 5 years had passed since the divorce. I was 35. Mason and I were married and living in that boring kind of happiness, the best kind. Calm, stable, real. We had a 2-year-old daughter, Zoe, who had my father's stubborn chin and Mason's amber eyes. One rainy afternoon, I was walking out of the Apex Global headquarters. My driver was waiting with an umbrella, but I stopped. There was a woman standing near the parking garage entrance, arguing with security. She looked old, much older than she should have. Her hair was thin and gray, she wore a patched, threadbare coat, and she was carrying a janitor's bucket. "I just need to speak with her," she yelled, her voice raspy. I recognized the voice. It lacked its former commanding edge, but the cadence was unmistakable. "Victoria?" The name slipped from my mouth. She turned around. Her face was gaunt, deep lines carved into the skin around her mouth. When she saw me standing in an immaculate tailored suit, radiating power and success, her shoulders slumped. "Chloe," she croaked. I nodded to the security guard. "It's fine, Steve." I walked over to Victoria, keeping a strict distance. "What do you want?" I asked. "If you're here to clean, the service entrance is around back." It was cruel, yes. But this was the woman who had plotted to steal my home. "I'm not here for work," she said, her hands shaking violently. "I came to beg." Victoria Vance, begging. The irony was almost suffocating. "Beg for what?" I asked, not softening my tone. She swallowed hard, looking down at her worn-out shoes as if hoping to disappear into them. "It's about the boy. Gavin." "Who is Gavin?" "Arthur's son," she said, her voice a thin thread. "Jessica's baby. He's 5. Jessica had abandoned her own son. That didn't surprise me. But what came next? "And he's sick," Victoria added. Her voice broke completely. "Gavin has leukemia. We don't have insurance. Medicaid only covers so much. He needs a specialist. He needs help." She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw real tears. Not the theatrical ones she used to manipulate people. These were the tears of a grandmother watching a child fade away. Arthur is still in prison, she continued. He can't do anything. I clean houses, but it's not enough. I know you hate us. I know we deserve it. But Gavin is innocent. He's just a little boy. I stood in the rain, listening to the drops hit my umbrella. I looked at her broken, diminished, and an old poison bubbled up in my mind. That phrase from the night under the bed. She has no idea this is all just a smokescreen. A wave of anger hit me. Why should I help? That child was living proof of the betrayal. A wound with a name and a face. But then I thought of Zoe, my daughter, sleeping safely at home, healthy and warm. I remembered my mother, who died with a broken heart, but never let go of her kindness. I am not giving you money, I said flatly. Victoria flinched, as if she had expected exactly that. I understand. I am not giving you money, I repeated, because I don't trust you. But tell me the name of the hospital. City Children's Clinical Hospital, she whispered. I nodded, never breaking eye contact. I will speak directly with the hospital administration. If the child is actually there, and if he is truly sick, I will cover his treatment anonymously. Apex Global has a charitable foundation. We will process it as a donation. She stared at me as if she couldn't comprehend the words. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Slowly, her knees buckled, and she dropped right onto the wet asphalt. Thank you, she sobbed, grabbing the hem of my slacks. Thank you. You're an angel. Forgive me for everything. I stepped back, pulling my leg free. I felt no victory watching her humiliate herself. Only a bitter pity. Get up, Victoria, I said. I'm not an angel. I'm just a mother. And regarding Arthur, not a word. I don't want him to know. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. He asks about you. He writes letters. You never answer. I burn them, I replied. I turned away. Goodbye, Victoria. I walked to my car, and as I sank into the leather seat, something inside me finally let go. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something else. The absolute certainty that I would never let their darkness poison me. That night, I hugged Zoe a little tighter than usual. I thought that was enough, that the circle was finally closed. But the universe had one last card to play, and it had sharp edges. A month after I agreed to pay for Gavin's treatment, I received a notification from the Department of Corrections. Arthur was requesting a visitation. Usually, I threw these away unopened, but attached to this one was a handwritten note. So disturbing it made my skin crawl. It's about Gavin. And about why you could never get pregnant. You need to know. My blood ran ice cold. During our relationship and brief marriage, Arthur and I never used protection. I wanted a baby. Every month, I would cry when the test came back negative. Arthur would stroke my hair and say, "It'll happen when the time is right." I drove to the federal penitentiary. Gray walls, the smell of industrial bleach and despair. I sat behind the plexiglass. They brought him out. Arthur looked 20 years older, thinning hair, pale skin, a noticeable limp. The arrogance was entirely gone. He was just a hunched figure of defeat. He picked up the phone. I picked up mine. "Chloe," he rasped. "You look incredible." "I'm happy, Arthur," I replied. "I became everything you never wanted me to be. I know about Gavin. My mother told me. You did it for the kid, not for me." I nodded, not arguing. "I know I don't have much time. I came to tell you something. Apologies aren't enough, but I need to clear my conscience." He took a deep breath, staring at his handcuffed wrists. "Do you remember how bad you wanted a baby? How you thought you were infertile?" My hand tightened around the receiver. "Yes, you weren't infertile, Chloe," he said. "My mother made me do it." The air vanished from my lungs. "Made you do what?" He swallowed hard, as if the words were tearing up his throat. "She was crushing up Plan B and emergency contraceptives. She told me to mix them into your smoothies, the ones I made you every Sunday. Or she would swap your daily vitamins with placebos." The room spun. The floor seemed to tilt slowly, nauseatingly. "Why?" I whispered. "Because she said if you got pregnant, the divorce would be messier," he answered. "A kid ties you together for 18 years. She wanted a clean break after we took the penthouse." He paused, and it got even worse. And she said she didn't want to risk a baby having your low-class genetics mixed with ours. She wanted Jessica to carry the heir. The nausea hit me so hard I almost blacked out. This wasn't just greed, this was violation. They had tampered with my body without touching me. They poisoned me from the inside out to ensure I remained barren, while I cried on his shoulder about being broken. My eyes burned, not with sadness, but with pure, unadulterated rage. And you let her do it? I spat out. You let them do that to me? Arthur started crying. I was weak. I was scared of her. And I was greedy. I'm sorry, Chloe. But look at it. It's a blessing, isn't it? Imagine if we had a kid. You would be tied to me forever. Now you're free. You have a whole new life. He was right, in the sickest, most twisted way possible. If I had his child, I never would have fully escaped. I would have spent my life co-parenting with a felon. Victoria would have been in my life forever. And my daughter, Zoe, never would have been born. You are right, I said, my voice trembling with fury. It is a blessing, because my children will never have a single drop of your rotten blood. I stood up. Chloe, wait, he panicked. I'm up for parole in 2 years. Can you put in a good word for me, since you helped Gavin? I looked at him through the glass. The sheer audacity made me let out a hollow laugh. I helped Gavin because he is an innocent child, I said. You are a grown man who allowed your mother to poison your wife. I will not say a single good word about you. In fact, I am sending the recording of this conversation directly to the parole board. I hope you rot in here. I slammed the phone down. I walked out of the prison, and the sunlight hit me like a slap across the face. I wandered aimlessly until I reached a bench near the parking lot, and then I broke. I cried for the baby I thought I couldn't have. I cried for the violation, but mostly, I cried from relief. It wasn't my body that had failed me. It was someone else's poison. Mason found me later. I had called him because I was shaking too hard to drive. He held me while I trembled. They can't hurt you anymore, he promised. And for the first time, I believed it. The secret was out. The poison was finally purged, and I felt clean. 10 years later. Apex Global was a massive international conglomerate. I was the CEO. My father had passed away a year earlier, peacefully in his sleep. His funeral was attended by senators, rival CEOs, and thousands of employees who respected him. And I stood at the helm. I was no longer the woman hiding under the bed. I was the woman who commanded a boardroom with a single look. Mason and I had been married for 12 years. We had 2 kids, Zoe, now 15, and our son, Leo, who was 10. We were sitting on the terrace of our summer house in the Hamptons. It was a strange, quiet afternoon, the kind that feels deceptively calm. Mom, Zoe said, not looking up from her phone. She was beautiful, brilliant, and possessed a romantic streak that terrified me because it mirrored my own youth. Can I invite Kyle over for the weekend? Kyle was her new boyfriend, captain of the lacrosse team. Charming, a little too charming. Mason and I exchanged a quick glance. The same Kyle who forgot his wallet when you guys went to the movies last week, I asked. He's just forgetful, Zoe defended him. He's really sweet. He says he loves that I'm not obsessed with money like other girls. Every alarm bell in my head went off. He loves that I'm not obsessed with money. The exact phrase predators use to begin their hunt. Invite him, I said smoothly. I'd love to get to know him. Mason squeezed my knee under the table. He understood without a word. I wasn't going to forbid it. I was going to observe. I was going to test. When Kyle arrived that weekend, he was polite. Too polite. He complimented the house, the cars, the art. He was especially sycophantic toward Mason, asking about the architecture firm with an unusual interest in profit margins and how lucrative the business was. During dinner, I initiated the test. Kyle, I said casually, Zoe tells me you're looking for a summer internship. Yes, Mrs. Wright, he smiled, flashing perfect teeth. I'd love to learn from the best. Maybe at Apex Global? Well, I said, we actually have an opening. Fieldwork, pouring concrete foundations. It starts at 5 a.m., minimum wage, but it builds character. You prove yourself there. And next summer, we talk about a corporate office. I watched him closely. His smile faltered. The greedy light in his eyes vanished. Oh, he cleared his throat. I was thinking more along the lines of strategy or marketing. I'm not really. Blue collar. Strategy is built from the ground up, Mason added, taking a sip of wine. I hauled drywall for 3 years before I ever drew a blueprint. Kyle looked at Zoe with a mix of annoyance and entitlement. Babe, didn't you say your mom could hook me up with something better? Concrete is kind of beneath my level, don't you think? Zoe froze. And then, the spirit of my father dropped onto the table like a boulder. Beneath your level? Zoe asked, her voice dropping an octave. My grandfather poured concrete. He built walls with his bare hands. Kyle laughed nervously, trying to backtrack. Well, yeah, but he had to. We are, elite. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. I think you need to leave, Zoe said quietly. What did I say? I said, you need to leave. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't back down. My family built this life through sweat. If you think hard work is beneath you, then I am above you. My eyes stung. She didn't have to hide under a bed to figure it out. She learned the lesson without having to swallow the poison. She had the spine I didn't have at her age. Kyle left, grumbling the whole way. When the door shut, Zoe walked over and hugged me. You knew? She asked. I suspected, I said, kissing her forehead. Always watch how people treat the work, not the reward. A week after the incident with Kyle, I received a call from a hospice center in the Bronx. It was about Victoria Vance. She was dying of ovarian cancer. She had no one left. Her sister had kicked her out years ago. Arthur was back in prison after violating his parole. Jessica had vanished. She listed you as her emergency contact, the nurse said cautiously. I don't know why, but she keeps asking for you. I went. The facility wasn't luxurious, but it was clean. Victoria lay in a narrow bed, emaciated down to a skeleton wrapped in paper-thin skin. Nothing remained of the woman with the silver stilettos and the razor-sharp tongue. I stood in the doorway. You came, she rasped, barely able to breathe. I came, I replied. Why? Because I won. I didn't say it with malice. It was just the bare, simple truth. I had won the game she tried to rig. I was alive, loved, and safe. She was dying alone. Victoria let out a dry laugh that devolved into a wet cough. Yes, you won. You were smarter than I thought. I thought you were just nice. I didn't know kindness could have teeth. Good people learn to grow teeth, I said. Otherwise, they get eaten. She closed her eyes for a moment. Gavin is okay, she whispered. He finished community college. He's an oncology nurse now. He knows you paid for everything. He calls you his guardian angel. I know, I said. I had kept tabs on him. Arthur, she mumbled, the name weighing a ton. He's a fool. I broke him. I wanted to control him, and I made him weak. She forced her eyes open, looking at me. I tried to do the same to you. You failed, I said. Her trembling hand pointed to the nightstand. I have something for you. A letter. Don't open it until I'm gone. I picked up the envelope. It felt weightless. Chloe, her voice began to rattle. I'm scared. I looked down at her. The woman who had humiliated me, poisoned me, and tried to steal my future. I hated her, but I couldn't let a human being die in absolute terror. I stepped closer and took her hand. It was freezing. Close your eyes, Victoria, I said softly. It's over. Let go. She squeezed my hand with unexpected strength. A single tear escaped the corner of her eye, and then her grip went slack. The heart monitor flatlined. She was gone. I walked out into the hallway and opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper and a faded Polaroid photograph. It was a picture of Arthur as a baby, sitting on Victoria's lap. In the photo, she looked young, almost hopeful, not yet hardened by greed. The note read, Chloe, I hated you because you had everything I wanted, and you didn't have to claw it away from life to get it. You had a light. I tried to steal it from you, and in the end, I burned myself. You were the best thing that ever happened to my son, and I made him lose you. I am leaving you nothing, because I have nothing. But I leave you this truth. You didn't just survive me. You eclipsed me. Tell Gavin to be a good man. I folded the letter. I felt no triumph. I just felt peace. I paid for her cremation and had the ashes shipped to the federal penitentiary so Arthur could receive them. It was the last thing I ever did for that family. Now, I am back on the terrace at the beach house. The late afternoon sun is melting into evening. The sky is painted bright orange and soft purple. I am sitting with a glass of vintage Bordeaux, the kind of wine Victoria would have sold her soul for. Down on the sand, Mason is trying to teach Leo how to fly a kite. Zoe is lying on a towel reading, looking like a younger version of me, only made of stronger stuff. My life is full. It is loud, it is messy, and it is real. I think about that night, almost 20 years ago. The dust under the bed, the smell of the hardwood, the crushing weight of betrayal. I remember the split second in the dark when I thought, maybe I can fix this. Maybe if I love him hard enough, he'll choose me over the money. Thank God I didn't listen to that voice. Thank God I chose anger. Thank God I chose war. People often ask me how I learned to trust again. How I can love Mason without constantly checking his pockets for receipts. The darkness taught me how to recognize the light. Arthur taught me what love isn't. Love isn't a transaction. Love isn't a secret agenda. Love isn't trying to dim someone else so they don't shine brighter than you. Love is Mason carving a crooked birdhouse with his own hands. Love is my father standing in a courtroom, defending my name. Love is paying for a sick child's chemotherapy, even when his father broke you from the inside out. Love is an action. I set my wine glass down and walk over to the railing. Mason looks up from the beach and waves. Chloe, look, it's flying. The kite catches the wind, fighting the resistance, climbing higher and higher until it finds the current and holds steady, dancing against the clouds. I see it. I yell back. It's beautiful. My name is Chloe Sterling. I am a mother. I am a CEO. I am a wife. And I am the woman who refused to be the punchline in someone else's story. Thank you for listening to my journey. Thank you for walking with me from the dusty floor of a bridal suite to the sunset of a peaceful life. And remember, no matter how dark it gets underneath the bed, there is always a way out. You just have to find the courage to crawl out and open the door. Take care of yourselves. You deserve it.